don't mistake sometimes where I come from when it comes to, talking to the Lord or listening to what He has to say. That every day it's real obvious or just perfectly clear. Some days, God literally just talks and that's obvious. Other days it's kind of like, kind of get an idea or you kind of get an impression. It's kind of like, God ain't talking so clear. Some days it's like, what? Huh? Where? What? Huh? Other days it's like, hello? And then some days it's like, don't you love me no more? And then of course the other days where it's more like, where are you? It's never really that bad. But there are days where I spend my time kind of going, well, Lord, what really do you want me to say? Kind of going along in my day and taking care of, the ministry things and sharing and, learning things and adapting them and applying them and taking care of plants. But sometimes it's just like, boom, blank. It's like, Lord, what are you trying to tell me? And sometimes I'm looking for God to speak when He's already spoken. I mean, sometimes it's just a question of really accepting what He said and leaving it at that. And I kind of did that more or less 2 or 3 times today in reading Daily Light, which is kind of my scriptural reading that I always read because it has only scripture. And it's really enjoyable because I like it because it does seem to always have these scriptures that fit together as though God were speaking. And it's really kind of neat, because once you let God, influence your ears, so to speak, or change your understanding, then you begin to appreciate what it is He's saying. Because sometimes you could read things and not get it. And then later read it and you got it. And by golly, you'll get it. Sometimes it just takes time. And for me this morning, that's kind of what it was. It's kind of like, I read it and I went, oh yeah, all right, fine. But what do you want me to say? I never really know what I'm going to say until I, kind of sit down and let the Holy Spirit take over and start talking. But from this morning, Lot lifted up his eyes and beheld all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, even as the garden of the Lord. Then Lot chose him all the plain of Jordan. Just Lot, that righteous man. Be not deceived, God is not mocked, for whatsoever man soweth, that also shall he reap. Remember Lot's wife. Be ye not unequally yoked together with unbelievers, for what fellowship hath unrighteousness with righteousness? And what communion hath light with darkness? Wherefore come out from among them, and be ye separate, saith the Lord, and touch not the unclean thing. Be not you partakers with them, for you were sometimes darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of the light, proving what is acceptable unto the Lord. And have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather reprove them. I see this so often, people doing the reproving part, but I don't think they get it. It's kind of, the works of God, you don't reprove, you let God determine their outcome. But the things that are of the world, you reprove them, meaning that you stay away from them. You don't get involved in worldly things. Often I'm seeing a lot, as I mentioned in a previous devotional, a lot of people getting worldly. They really enjoy the world. They like it. They love it. They can't get enough of it. They want more, they get more, they're going to participate more in it. And I hate to say it, but being involved in the world is like quicksand. You take that first step and sucks you right in. Bingo. You don't even know that you're up to your neck in quicksand. So by the time it's time to get yourself out of it, you can't get out. Too late. Kind of like Lot's wife. The angel came and gave them plenty of time to really get things together and get out. He finally says, come on, let's go. And he says, well, can I go this city? Can I go here? Can I, negotiating. But finally, it's like, let's go. And they should have kept going. But unfortunately, we find ourselves a lot like Lot's wife, looking back to kind of think, well, maybe if I go do this first or take care of this, And Jesus had an interesting statement. He told someone to follow me, and they said, well, I want to go. I need to go bury my brother, or my father. And he says, no, let the dead bury the dead, because it would have taken them, based in those days, about a week before he would have followed it. And even then, maybe wrapping up, final details would take him too long. Sometimes that's what we're like. We get involved, again, sucked into the world, that quicksand pit of thinking that we're just doing a little thing, when we stepped into it, and guess what? It sucked you right in. There's a place up in Alaska, in Anchorage, that's great, now that I said it, I probably won't even remember it. Rats, boiled again. But it's this giant bay that kind of, like the tide comes in from miles away, and then it goes back out. Goes in, goes back out. So you're up on the road, and you look out, and you see all this mud out there, and you think, wow, that looks pretty sound and solid and secure. But you don't realize that underneath there's a lot of moisture content in that clay, mud, water, sand mixture that is constantly changing and rearranging itself. So people have gone out there at times thinking that it was solid, and got sucked in. And then the problem is that not only do they get sucked in, but then slowly the tide comes back in, and it rises and drowns you. Well, most people get rescued before then, but I've seen it. And it's amazing how solid that looks. I've gone across it once or twice, dangerously, stupidly, sticking a pole down in, kind of walking, maybe spongy, kind of making sure I'm planting my feet the right way and watching, and kind of like working my way to where I could get out in the middle of it, and waving at tourists that went by, but still knowing there's only certain places you could walk out there. But it was fun, it was dumb, but it was fun. But it's kind of like the world, is that way. You could walk out there and get away with it maybe once, maybe twice, maybe 3 times. But when it finally comes time, like if I was out there on one of those sandbars that was pretty safe, not completely, but pretty safe, if suddenly in, say, a storm from the ocean, because the ocean's far away from, Port of Anchorage, you got to cut, it comes a long ways in. If suddenly a wall of water came in from a tsunami or any number of things where just suddenly the water rose up, it would come in so fast, I would have been killed. No question about it. There was no way I'd get off that sandbar and get to the road fast enough. Not a chance. It's way out there. So that's kind of what happens when you go way into the world. You find yourself involved in all these things that are only going to wipe you out once the waters come back in, or the tide comes back in. And that's kind of what's happening in the political arena, kind of what happened in this whole idea of, we were once a Christian nation, 10 years ago when we had Dobson on the radio and all that stuff. No, we weren't. Things were all happening at the same time. It just, the tide came in, the tide will go out. The tide will come in, the tide will go out. It will happen again in the nation, as it always has, in all of these things. It isn't just a downhill decline. It's a constant changing and eroding. Now, it is true that if you haven't designed yourself to handle the tide, that there's an erosion process where maybe your house is getting kind of like, close to the shoreline, because it's been all this stuff that you put in the way, to protect yourself in the life that you built is now being eroded away by kind of like the tides, time. And slowly but surely, your house has gotten closer and closer to where the next time the tide comes in, it's going to tear out your foundation. Seen that happen. That's about the time that you ought to say, hey, you know what? I think I'll leave it behind. And I think I'll just turn my life back over to Jesus. Because getting involved in the world will only do one thing. It'll kill you. It will. It will suck you in. It will hold you there until you drown in the world and its ways. But when you decide to follow God, at any point in time, It's almost as though he comes along like with a helicopter and just says, hey, I'm dangling the line, grab a hold. What? I'm dangling the line, grab a hold. What? I'm dangling the line, grab a hold. What? You got to grab the line. There's a part for you to do. Grab the line. Wrap it around. Tie it on. Get lifted out of there. Because you see, you're not where you're supposed to be. If you're involved in the world, really, if you're really wrapped up in it and just kind of sucked in, and you're kind of bummed out, and kind of, looking around and realizing, hey, you know what? I don't see so many people around me all happy and, prayerful and praying and saying stuff about Jesus. I sure see a lot of people talking about politics and the world and the economy and the end of the world and, getting ready to, like save food and, do all these weird things, because they think that, they're going to prepare themselves. That seems kind of strange, Maybe I should get involved in that. And then you see another thing. Maybe I should try that. Maybe not. Maybe. And rather, I would say pray and ask God today whether or not you should be involved or be absolving yourself from those things you are involved in. Because I know for myself, I had to really take that to heart today. I had to make some conscious choices to not get involved in some worldly things. And it was tough because it looked spiritual. It sounded spiritual. I've been doing it for a few years as Christian, spiritual. But it really was the world. And it was, on the one hand, people would say, well, it's kind of neutral. Well, with God, there's no neutral. You're either for Jesus or you're against Him. So I started a new campaign called, something like, what would Jesus do? Or it's on the internet anyways. But just simply I put a post that says, ask yourself 3 questions, Would Jesus do this? Is this promoting Jesus? Is this relating to Jesus? Does it have anything to do with God? I mean, why post it then? Why bother? What are you doing with your time? Are you wasting time or are you making time for God? And it's Campaign 2012, meaning that trying to remind Christians who they are. You're being Christ-like. And if you're talking to other Christians and you're just throwing out junk and bunk and stuff that flushes down the toilet, why bother? It stinks. Don't do it. Spend the quality time so you have something to share or to say or to be. And God will use you in that way. But if you really are, sinking down in that quicksand and that mire that you don't realize that you're in, a bog, then go to God to get you out of the bog so that you're not lost in the fog of thinking that you're somehow okay, when the reality is you look down and you're up to your neck in dirt and mud, and part of it's been coming out of your own mouth, spewing it right on top of yourself. You've been vomiting your own garbage and it's right on you. You need to get cleaned up. Get it? Maybe it's time to check back in with He who saved you in the first place and find out where He wants you to go and what He wants you to do and how He wants you to remove yourself from the world and its ways and seek a better way for you to walk today.